What if I told you? The scariest part of Euphoria Season 3 Episode 7 isn't the violence, isn't the betrayal, and isn't even the possibility that Rue could die. It's the fact that every single character finally realizes they destroyed their own lives. And now there's no way back. This episode feels less like a normal episode of Euphoria, and more like watching people emotionally drown in slow motion. From Rue literally buried alive, to Nate losing control of everything he spent years manipulating, to Cassie finally snapping completely. Episode 7 might secretly be the darkest chapter this show has ever made. And trust me, the final 5 minutes? They changed the entire meaning of Season 3. So today, we're breaking down the complete episode scene by scene, every hidden detail, every emotional moment, and the ending that proves nobody in Euphoria escapes their past. And after watching this episode, one thing becomes painfully clear. Rock bottom doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, quietly, and by the time you notice it, it's already too late. The episode opens in complete darkness. No music, no intro, just the sound of heavy breathing. At first, we can't even tell where we are. Everything is black. Then slowly, we hear dirt moving, small particles falling, a weak cough, someone trying to breathe, and then suddenly, Rue opens her eyes. Her face is covered in mud, blood, and rainwater dripping through the loose dirt above her. She's buried underground after the horrifying cliffhanger from the previous episode, and immediately the show makes you feel trapped with her. The camera barely moves. Every shot feels claustrophobic. You can hear Rue struggling for oxygen while panic slowly takes over. And what makes the scene even worse is Rue's narration quietly saying, "When people imagine dying, they think it feels dramatic." But honestly, most of the time it probably just feels confusing. That line sets the tone for the entire episode. Because episode 7 isn't really about death. It's about consequences. Rue starts trying to move her arms, but one side of her body is trapped under wet dirt. Rain above the ground slowly starts making the soil heavier, which means if she doesn't escape soon, she could literally suffocate. Meanwhile, the episode cuts to Maddy sitting alone inside a luxury apartment staring at her phone. And this scene is incredibly important because for the first time all season, Maddy looks scared. Not angry, not confident, not in control, scared. She keeps replaying Rue's final voicemail from episode 6 over and over again. "If something happens to me, don't let them turn me into another story." Maddy pauses the message halfway through, and you can instantly tell she regrets something. One of the smartest things about Season 3 is how it transformed Maddy from someone obsessed with appearance into someone slowly realizing power means nothing when your soul is empty. The camera stays on Maddy for almost 30 seconds without dialogue. That silence matters because Euphoria usually moves fast emotionally. But here, the stillness feels uncomfortable. It's guilt, real guilt. The episode then shifts toward Nate, and honestly, this might be one of the most depressing Nate scenes in the entire series. Nate walks through his nearly empty house while overdue payment notices cover the kitchen counter. His phone keeps vibrating nonstop from debt collectors, lawyers, and business partners threatening him. The perfect life Nate tried building all season is collapsing in front of him. And what's brilliant about the cinematography is that Nate is constantly framed alone in giant empty spaces. Huge rooms, huge hallways, huge windows. The show visually tells us he finally has everything he wanted, and nobody left to share it with. Nate pours himself a drink at 9 a.m. and stares at his reflection in the kitchen window. But instead of seeing himself clearly, the reflection is distorted by rain outside. Symbolically, Nate no longer recognizes who he became. Then comes Cassie, and this episode quietly confirms something fans suspected for a long time. Cassie is addicted to attention the same way Rue was addicted to drugs. The show doesn't say it directly, but it shows it constantly. Every single Cassie scene includes mirrors, phone screens, cameras, or reflections somewhere in the frame. She wakes up in expensive sheets surrounded by designer clothes, immediately checks social media, and smiles, seeing thousands of comments praising her appearance online. But the smile disappears almost instantly, because attention no longer makes her happy. Now she needs it just to feel normal. That's the tragedy of Cassie's character this season. She spent years wanting validation so badly that eventually she lost her actual identity. Meanwhile, underground, Rue finally manages to move one hand free from the dirt. And this sequence is absolutely terrifying. The sound design becomes louder with every breath. Dirt falls into her mouth while she desperately tries clawing upward through mud and rocks. But then Rue stops moving because she starts hallucinating. She hears her father's voice, and suddenly the scene becomes emotional instead of physical. Rue imagines herself sitting beside her dad in their old living room from season 1, warm lighting, calm music, safe. Her father asks, "You tired?" And Rue quietly says, "Yeah, not crying, not panicking, just exhausted." That single word perfectly describes Rue's entire life. The hallucination continues while underground Rue slowly loses oxygen. Her father tells her, "You know the scary thing about pain? Eventually people build their whole personality around surviving it." That line is one of the deepest lines in the entire season because it explains almost every character. Rue survives addiction. Cassie survives loneliness. Nate survives shame. Maddy survives exploitation. Jules survives emotional abandonment. Everybody in Euphoria became so focused on surviving pain that they forgot how to actually live. Back above ground, Maddy finally makes a decision. And this is where the episode completely changes. She secretly drives to the construction site where Rue was buried. The tension during this sequence is incredible because the audience knows if Alamo discovers Maddy helping Rue, she's dead too. Rain pours heavily while Maddy searches through muddy ground using only her phone flashlight. And then she hears something. Weak scratching under the dirt. The moment Maddy starts digging with her bare hands is honestly one of the most powerful scenes in the season because it's the first genuinely selfless thing she's done in years. No money, no manipulation, no benefit for herself. Just humanity. When Rue finally emerges from the dirt gasping for air, the scene doesn't feel heroic. It feels ugly, painful, real. Rue collapses while coughing blood and rainwater. Maddy wraps a blanket around her while trying not to cry. Then Rue asks the question that changes everything. "Why are you helping me?" And Maddy responds, "Because nobody helped me when I needed it." That line explains Maddy's entire arc. Underneath the confidence, makeup, and control, Maddy has always been someone abandoned emotionally by everyone around her. For a moment, these two broken people finally understand each other. The episode then slows down and shifts toward Jules, and honestly, this might be the best Jules writing the show has had in years. Jules attends an art exhibition in another city where everyone praises her work, calls her brilliant, and treats her like a rising star. But throughout the entire scene, Jules looks emotionally disconnected. The lighting here is cold and artificial compared to Rue's warmer hallucination scenes earlier. Symbolically, Jules achieved success but lost emotional intimacy. At one point, a photographer asks Jules to smile during an interview, and she physically can't do it. That tiny detail says everything. Later that night, Jules sits alone in her apartment watching an old video of Rue laughing from years ago. No dialogue, no soundtrack, just Rue laughing naturally before addiction fully destroyed her life. And Hunter Schafer's performance here is incredible because Jules looks simultaneously in love with the memory and devastated knowing that version of Rue barely exists anymore. Back with Nate and Cassie, things finally explode. Nate discovers Cassie secretly opened a private account hiding money from him, and the argument that follows feels less like a relationship fight and more like two emotionally broken people destroying each other. Cassie screams, "You don't love people, you own them!" And Nate completely freezes, because deep down, he knows she's right. That line destroys him more than any insult could. For years, Nate controlled everyone through fear, manipulation, or emotional dependency. But now even Cassie sees through him completely. The camera work during this scene becomes chaotic. Handheld movements, sudden close-ups, uncomfortable silence between lines. Euphoria films the argument almost like a horror movie. At one point, Nate punches a wall hard enough to bloody his hand. But instead of looking scared, Cassie just looks tired. That's what makes the scene heartbreaking. She's emotionally numb now. The relationship already destroyed her long before this moment. Meanwhile, Rue and Maddy hide inside an abandoned motel while trying to avoid Alamo's men. And these scenes contain some of the best dialogue in the episode. Maddy asks Rue, "Do you ever think people like us were always gonna end up like this?" Rue answers, "No, I think we just kept making small bad decisions until suddenly our whole lives changed." That line perfectly summarizes Euphoria as a show. Nobody ruined their life overnight. It happened gradually, one bad decision at a time. The motel scenes also reveal something important about Rue. Even after everything, she still believes she deserves punishment. When Maddy gives